Welcome, dear soul, to this powerful healing journey of forgiveness and ancestral liberation. In this video, we will release karmic pain, forgive our ancestors, and bless our lineage with love, light, and spiritual freedom. Please do subscribe my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, Mindfulwithsonashri. See, as you listen to these affirmations, allow your heart to open, your mind to release old patterns, and your soul to embrace healing. Repeat the affirmation silently or aloud, feel their energy, and let the divine grace guide your family line toward forgiveness, peace, and moksha. Remember, this practice works best with an open heart and daily listening. Trust the process, surrender to the divine, and watch the transformation flow through you and your lineage. Affirmations for releasing karmic cycles and collective memories. I release all karmic cycles that no longer serve my lineage. I release all karmic cycles that no longer serve my lineage. I forgive and let go of ancestral debts. I forgive and let go of ancestral debts. I release inherited pain into divine light. I release inherited pain into divine light. I forgive all patterns repeated across generations. I forgive all patterns repeated across generations. I release fear, anger, and resentment from my ancestry. I release fear, anger, and resentment from my ancestry. I forgive karmic ties that keep my family in struggle. I forgive karmic ties that keep my family in struggle. I release collective memories of pain with love. I release collective memories of pain with love. I forgive past mistakes of my lineage. I forgive past mistakes of my lineage. I release cycles of limitations and lack. I release cycles of limitations and lack. I forgive ancestral patterns of mistrust. I forgive ancestral patterns of mistrust. I release inherited emotional burdens with compassion. I release inherited emotional burdens with compassion. I forgive the suffering carried by my ancestors. I forgive the sufferings carried by my ancestors. I release generational guilt from my family tree. I release generational guilt from my family tree. I forgive cycles of family conflict and misunderstanding. I forgive cycles of family conflict and misunderstandings. I release karmic fear and doubt. I release karmic fear and doubt. I forgive patterns of abandonment in my lineage. I forgive patterns of abandonment in my lineage. I release ancestral trauma and resentment. I release ancestral trauma and resentment. I forgive karmic blocks to abundance. I forgive karmic blocks to abundance. I release inherited sorrow from past generations. I release inherited sorrow from past generations. I forgive cycles of unhealed emotional wounds. I forgive cycles of unhealed emotional wounds. I release fear and worry passed through my family line. I release fear and worry passed through my family line. I forgive ancestral limitations on love and joy. I forgive ancestral limitations on love and joy. I release karmic cycles of struggle and hardship. I release karmic cycles of struggle and hardship. I forgive patterns of conflict within my lineage. I forgive patterns of conflict within my lineage. I release ancestral attachments to pain. I release ancestral attachments to pain. I forgive all suffering carried in my DNA. I forgive all sufferings carried in my DNA. I release karmic burdens from past lifetimes. I release karmic burdens from past lifetimes. I forgive cycles of separation and neglect. I forgive cycles of separation and neglect. I release collective memories of grief and loss. I release collective memories of grief and loss. I forgive ancestral patterns of anger and aggression. I forgive ancestral patterns of anger and aggression. I release karmic energy that blocks family harmony. I release karmic energy that blocks family harmony. I forgive limitations carried by my lineage. I forgive limitations carried by my lineage. I release pain and sorrow held in my family line. I release pain and sorrow held in my family line. I forgive all unhealed family trauma. I forgive all unhealed family trauma. I release generational fear of failure. I release generational fear of failure. I forgive karmic patterns that limit my growth. I forgive karmic patterns that limit my growth. I release inherited family tension and stress. I release inherited family tension and stress. I forgive cycles of betrayal in my lineage. I forgive cycles of betrayal in my lineage. I release ancestral fear of love and intimacy. I release ancestral fear of love and intimacy. I forgive karmic energy that blocks family abundance. I forgive karmic energy that blocks family abundance. I release collective suffering into divine light. I release collective suffering into divine light. I forgive cycles of jealousy and competition in my ancestry. I forgive cycles of jealousy and competition in my ancestry. I release ancestral pain from misunderstandings. I release ancestral pain from misunderstandings. I forgive my family patterns of control and restrictions. I forgive family patterns of control and restrictions. I release karmic bonds with love and compassion. I release karmic bonds with love and compassion. I forgive ancestral trauma that affects my family. I forgive ancestral trauma that affects my family. I forgive ancestral trauma that affects my life. I forgive ancestral trauma that affects my life. I release cycles of fear, shame, and guilt from my lineage. I release cycles of fear, shame, and guilt from my lineage. I forgive patterns of limitations in my family tree. I forgive patterns of limitation in my family tree. I release collective ancestral anger. I release collective ancestral anger. I forgive karmic blocks inherited from past generations. I forgive karmic blocks inherited from past generations. I release patterns of lack and limitation in my lineage. I release patterns of lack and limitation in my lineage. I forgive cycles of struggle carried across generations. I forgive cycles of struggle carried across generations. I release karmic energy tied to fear and worry. I release karmic energy tied to fear and worry. I forgive ancestral blocks to love and joy. I forgive ancestral blocks to love and joy. I release pain held in family relationships. I release pain held in family relationships. I forgive cycles of emotional repression in my lineage. I forgive cycles of emotional repression in my lineage. I release karmic patterns of scarcity and limitation. I release karmic patterns of scarcity and limitations. I forgive inherited fear of success and abundance. I forgive inherited fear of success and abundance. I release ancestral memories of sadness and loss. I release ancestral memories of sadness and loss. I forgive all sufferings in my family history. I forgive all sufferings in my family history. I release karmic cycles of illness and pain. I release karmic cycles of illness and pain. I forgive ancestral patterns of misunderstandings. I forgive ancestral patterns of misunderstandings. I release generational blocks to peace and love. I release generational blocks to peace and love. I forgive cycles of dishonesty in my lineage. I forgive cycles of dishonesty in my lineage. I release collective memories of struggle and hardship. I release collective memories of struggle and hardship. I forgive karmic energy that limits family harmony. I forgive karmic energy that limits family harmony. I release inherited emotional pain with love. I release inherited emotional pain with love. I forgive patterns of resentment and anger in my ancestry. I forgive patterns of resentment and anger in my ancestry. I release karmic ties that no longer serve the lineage. I release karmic ties that no longer serve the lineage. I forgive ancestors for all unhealed wounds. I forgive ancestors for all unhealed wounds. I release cycles of fear and anxiety carried through generations. I release cycles of fear and anxiety carried through generations. I forgive karmic patterns of limitation and scarcity. I forgive karmic patterns of limitation and scarcity. I release ancestral trauma with a divine grace. I release ancestral trauma with a divine grace. I forgive cycles of oppression in my lineage. I forgive cycles of oppression in my lineage. I release collective ancestral blocks to abundance. I release collective ancestral blocks to abundance. I forgive patterns of family betrayals and misunderstandings. I forgive patterns of family betrayals and misunderstandings. I forgive patterns of family betrayal and misunderstanding. I release karmic energy of anger and resentment. I release karmic energy of anger and resentment. I forgive my ancestors for struggles and limitations. I forgive my ancestors for struggles and limitations. I release generational pain and fear. I release generational pain and fear. I forgive cycles to guilt and shame in my lineage. I forgive cycles of guilt and shame in my lineage. I release karmic patterns of emotional suppression. I release karmic patterns of emotional suppression. I forgive family patterns of separation and loss. I forgive family patterns of separation and loss. I release ancestral suffering with love. I release ancestral suffering with love. I forgive karmic energy that keeps my lineage in pain. I forgive karmic energy that keeps my lineage in pain. I release cycles of struggle from my family line. I release cycles of struggle from my family line. I forgive patterns of mistrust and fear in my lineage. I forgive patterns of mistrust and fear in my lineage. I release inherited blocks to love and joy. I release inherited blocks to love and joy. I forgive ancestors for all limitations they carried. I forgive ancestors for all limitations they carried. I release karmic chains that bind my lineage. I release karmic chains that bind my lineage. I forgive cycles of family conflict and misunderstanding. I forgive cycles of family conflict and misunderstandings. I release ancestral pain into divine light. I release ancestral pain into divine light. I forgive generational blocks to healing and peace. I forgive generational blocks to healing and peace. I release karmic burdens with love and grace. I release karmic burdens with love and grace. I forgive cycles of anger and resentment in my lineage. I forgive cycles of anger and resentment in my lineage. I release inherited trauma and sorrow. I release inherited trauma and sorrow. I forgive ancestors for all unhealed emotional pain. I forgive ancestors for all unhealed emotional pain. I release collective family suffering into divine light. I release collective family suffering into divine light. I forgive karmic patterns that affect my life today. I forgive karmic patterns that affect my life today. I release generational fear and limitation. I release generational fear and limitation. I forgive and release all ancestral and collective pain, opening my lineage to healing, liberation, and divine progress. I forgive and release all ancestral and collective pain, opening my lineage to healing, liberation, and divine progress. I forgive and release all ancestral and collective pain, opening my lineage to healing, liberation, and divine progress. Thank you for joining this sacred journey of ancestral forgiveness and liberation. Continue to listen daily and allow these affirmations to heal, release, and bless your lineage. If this practice touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe my YouTube channel Mindful with Sonashri for more healing content. Together, we are creating a ripple of love, forgiveness, and spiritual awakening. May your family line be healed, may your ancestors find peace, and may your souls flourish in love and light. Om Shanti. Thank you so much for listening to me.